Hello friends, my name is Haley and I am so excited for this video because I am reviewing The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, and I am in absolute love with this book. I was actually worried. I've mentioned before that I'm very critical of books, and I was really worried that I wouldn't find a book that would bring me as much joy as books did before I started to analyze them so much, and this was just like a breath of fresh air. It's the best book I've read in a really long time, other than like rereads. So this was just, it was a good timing for it because I've had a really rough month, and this was just what I needed. It was just a huge uplifter. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to tell you all about it. And this is a spoiler-free review, by the way, so it's safe to listen to the whole thing if you haven't read the book. So if you don't know, which I'd be really surprised if you haven't heard about this book because it is everywhere. It's all over YouTube. It was last month's OwlCrate, so pretty much everybody seems to know what this book is. But if you are one of the few who haven't heard about it, it is about a gentleman named Monty. He's been kicked out of school and he's ready to inherit his family's estate. But before he does so, he goes on this grand tour of Europe. And he goes along with his best friend, Percy, and his sister, Felicity, who he does not want coming along. But of course, what would a story be if the main character got everything that he wanted? In addition to that, he has some feelings for his friend Percy, as he is bisexual. And one of the defining characteristics of Monty is that I think the word debauchery can be used to describe his life. So he's into drinking and sleeping around with men and women and gambling and all the things, all of the vices and virtues. See that in the title there? When I first heard about this story, I was like, this sounds like bisexual Chuck Bass. Sign me up. And it is very much like Chuck Bass. I would say Monty's probably a little bit more moral than Chuck, even from the beginning of the book, but he definitely does have Chuck Bass characteristics. And if you like Chuck Bass, like I like Chuck Bass, you need to get on this book right now. Chuck Bass is from Gossip Girl, by the way, if you didn't know. He is set to inherit his estate, but it is in vain. He has a very difficult relationship with his father. As you might imagine, in the 18th century, his father doesn't quite approve of his lifestyle, so he's been very hard on him his whole life. So even just taking this tour is kind of a sigh of relief. It's a chance to get away from all of the craziness of his everyday life. So I knew immediately that, okay, well, if he's like Chuck Bass, he's probably going to have a big character arc that's going to make him change a lot by the end. And I was very, very right, and it was very satisfying to see how this character changed. First things first, I want to get the book's weakest point out of the way first so we can just get into what's fantastic about it. There's sadly a lot of typos in this book, and for something professionally published, I was really surprised. And it's like some kind of typos, I guess, but there's also just grammatical errors. And I was just really surprised because for the most part it is well written and well edited, but there's more grammatical errors that slipped through than there should be. I can allow like one or two, but there were several and I was just really surprised. However, I still gave this book a 5-star rating because as much as I'm a stickler for grammar, it wasn't important to me. I wish that they had made a better print of the book, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of this incredible story. So the writing style is great. It is very realistic. It doesn't sound modern at all. I've read historical sounding books that sounded like they were written today. That is when historical fiction does not work for me. So I was really happy with it, and there's even some like slang terms that I'm not familiar with. I don't know if it's British slang or like Old English slang, but either way, you kind of figure out along the way what the words are supposed to mean. I think that's part of the fun, is kind of putting the pieces together of the language. So now for the characters. So I kind of already went a lot into Monty's character, as he's debauchery personified and a bit of a, I don't know if I guess he's kind of a troublemaker. He's just one of those people, he just does what he wants. He doesn't really care what people think of him. And honestly, it gets him in trouble, but I also at the same time think it's one of the beautiful things about his character, because it's the 18th century and he's bisexual and he doesn't really care. Like, he understands that he can't really tell people about it, but at the same time, he's surprisingly pretty open. It's also really eye-opening to read this and see how people are treated for not just being straight and what people considered to be just normal. It's eye-opening to see that things really haven't changed. Yes, things are a bit better because in our country people only get murdered for it, but in a lot of other countries they do. There are a lot of places where things haven't changed. So while it's sad to think about how hard it was for people in that time to be who they were, it's also beautiful to read this character who was he had absolutely no shame about who he was, and I absolutely love that about that character. Monty is also a bit selfish, but that's one of the things he learns along the way with the help of his friend Percy. Going into his character, he's just a sweet person. There's not a bad bone in his body. He speaks for himself and he knows what he wants, and I can't recall, thinking off the top of my head, any moment in the book where he really doubted what he wanted. He's a very strong companion, and I think he's really the backbone for Monty. I think what's great about Percy's character is that he's completely described, obviously, from Monty's point of view. So he just talks about how wonderful of a person he is, and makes the reader fall in love with Percy. Like, I wanted more Percy. Whenever there wasn't a scene with Percy, I was like, I want more Percy, and I think I was going along with Monty and wanting more of this character like Monty did. And then his sister Felicity. I love their relationship, and I feel like it's something that might get overlooked a bit, because I think a lot of the focus is about Monty and Percy's relationship when people talk about it. But Felicity is great. She's a very strong woman. She's one of those characters who doesn't care about what's expected of her at the time, but it's not something that she makes a big deal about. She just does what she wants to do. Again, there's just a bunch of strong characters in this book. And it's beautiful because, again, at that time, it wasn't really possible for women to do as much either. She's kind of the Hermione of the group, really. I thought of Hermione a lot. The boys would kind of be bumbling along this journey if she wasn't there. So Monty and Felicity's relationship is kind of set up as a batting heads kind of relationship. So that's another prediction I kind of made, was that they're gonna learn to understand each other better by the end of the story. Do they? Guess you gotta read the book to find out about that. I liked watching their relationship develop, and it was just really fun to see how smart and resourceful Felicity was. There's just so much to enjoy about this story. Obviously, the relationships, the romantic parts of the story are so well written. Character development is fantastic. The journey that they go on, their little side journey, is really fun. You never know kind of exactly what's gonna happen. Times were very different, obviously, and I love learning about history, so when you can mix history, when there's at least a little bit of research into it, and fiction, it's a really fun time. I cannot say enough praises. I couldn't stop thinking about this book. I'm still thinking. I finished it last night, so it hasn't been a whole long time, but I was so sad that this book was over. Like, it affected me more than a lot of books have in a long time, and I wish there was more. It doesn't feel like a book that's gonna get a sequel. I don't know what could really be done with that, but I hope somehow there could be a sequel. I have hope for a sequel because I just want more of Monty and Percy and Felicity. It was such a good dynamic, and just I can just go on and just keep saying I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. I was sad that the book ended, and I think that's a special feeling when you read a book. So 5 stars all around. It is so fun. So that's going to do it for my review of The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, and I will see you guys soon.